Don't become accustomed to being treated like shit. These days, senators don't even have to show up to work to filibuster. Any senator can send an email, and if 60 other senators don't feel like challenging it, that's enough to filibuster a bill. And the senator doesn't even have to tell the American people why. And I think they should. If you're getting paid by my tax dollars to not make lynching illegal, I want you to have to stand up there and say why. And I want you to be wearing really pointy, uncomfortable shoes when you do it. Also, I'm sure every speech would start out with some pretty language about states' rights or something, but there is no way a racist can talk that long without saying something racist, and I want to see it. I think it would be funny. So now you're thinking, okay, just because the filibuster started out racist and then was only used to be racist for a long time, that doesn't mean it's racist now, right? Oh, you sweet summer child. It's true that these days the filibuster is used for a wider variety of issues, but any guesses on when Republicans set the record for doing the most filibusters? Can you guess who was in office? I'll give you one more guess. That's right. So the filibuster is like when you see a white person buying brown makeup on Halloween, technically they could be using it for anything, but they're probably gonna do a racism. So that's how we got to where we are now. Thanks in large part to the filibuster, we are still struggling with Black people's voting rights. Don't believe me? Ask Representative Park Cannon, the Georgia lawmaker who got arrested just for knocking on the door of someone who was trying to pass a voter suppression law. She got charged with a felony. Just kidding, she got charged with 2. Can you imagine telling someone marching in the 60s that we still wouldn't have this stuff figured out by 2021? They'd be so disappointed. Then they'd be like, but you guys have flying cars, right? And you'd have to be like, oh, no, but we have automatic sinks, but they don't recognize Black people. Sorry, the future is bad. The filibuster is keeping Black Americans from having full voting rights, and it's keeping all Americans from being safe from gun violence. And frankly, the word itself sounds very stupid. Democrats should get rid of it, or at least make senators see how long they can talk without letting the N-word slip out. Now, ever since the election, there's been a lot of talk in the media online, and maybe even in your white family's group chat, about how it's a time to reach out to Republicans who are upset about the election, about how it's important to build bridges to Trump supporters and to find common ground with them. And I just wanted to let each and every person out there know that you 100% absolutely do not have to do that. In all honesty, I would suggest you don't, and here's why. Trump supporters are racist, and if you create a space for racists to thrive, they will. And is that something you want? Truly, can Cindy come over to your house and be like, yuck, Mexicans? Because if so, you are providing a safe place for her racism to flourish. Don't be like that. Giving a racist your time and energy is like giving a seed water and light. It helps them grow into a flower, but not a normal flower, one of those terrifying flowers from Little Shop of Horrors. You don't owe them anything, especially forgiveness, because it's okay if you don't forgive them for what they've done. Separating families, empowering white supremacists, bringing back Kid Rock. Your sympathy and empathy are important and necessary gifts, but you don't have to give those gifts away at the expense of your humanity. It is not a white elephant party with your office. It's a red elephant party, and all of their gifts are bad and hate Black people. So if you needed someone to tell you this, here goes. You do not have to go to their weddings, and you do not have to invite them to yours. Your uncle isn't weird. Weird uncles have eye patches and tell ghost stories. Your uncle is a racist. And if he has an eye patch, you have a weird uncle who is also a racist. And whenever we can have Thanksgiving together again, you don't have to go. And if you do go, you can tell everybody that Uncle Patchy ain't shit. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying anything radical. I'm not saying burn it down yet. But really, I'm not saying cuss everyone out. I'm just saying you don't have to be sweet to everyone. Kindness is your gift to dole out as you see fit, and I really want you to hear this. Searching for the good in someone who thinks nothing of you is how they condition us to become accustomed to being treated like shit. Don't become accustomed to being treated like shit. You don't have to be nice to Trump supporters. You don't have to find ways to get close to them. In fact, you shouldn't get close to them because they're probably not wearing a mask. They deserve to lose and they lost. And they're allowed to be sad, but you're allowed to laugh at them because after all the things they did to us, this shit is funny as hell. Recently, a school in Michigan had a meeting with parents to address problems they've been having with racism in their school district. And in the middle of that meeting, while a father was talking about his son, this happened.
I remember when I went to his bedroom to say goodnight and he was crying because of the abuse that he was enduring in this school system.
Then why did you stay in Mexico?
You need to leave.
Yes, she did. You need to leave. Play it again.
You need to leave.
That's right, lady we don't completely get to see. You are the ally of the week. Take that you got my order wrong energy and punish this dizzy bitch with his hands up like, I didn't know we weren't doing racist shit today. How does it feel to be hilariously, kindly, and completely destroyed by someone who I'm assuming is the size of a pea? You don't have to be a superhero to be an ally. You can just be a person who's had enough. And also, a soprano? The anger that rose up in that lady's chest when she told your raggedy behind what really is a shining example of what an ally can be. I have watched that video 20 times, and tonight after the show, I'm gonna go home and watch it 20 more. In fact, I'm gonna watch it again right now.
You need to leave.
You almost never get to see a racist out in the cold light of day, loud and wrong, get ripped to shreds by an entire community. It was beautiful, and it would not have been possible without the ally of the week. So wherever you are, whoever you are, we salute you. Now, technology exists to make our lives better, but sometimes things that are there to make life easier actually make some people's lives a lot harder. The problems can show up in tiny, annoying ways, like this story about automatic soap dispensers that don't recognize black hands. That's right. Think of automatic soap dispensers like the TV show Friends. They're clean, they're everywhere, and they're totally unaware that black people exist. But here's the thing. When it comes to technology and black people, it's not just our hands that are getting done dirty. First, let's talk about something called artificial intelligence, or AI. That's basically when computers are programmed to do things that usually take human brains. It's how you get personalized shopping recommendations on Instagram, or why Google Maps can tell you how to avoid traffic, or why anyone who named their daughter Alexa is going to be apologizing for the rest of their life. Alexa, I'm sorry. Alexa, shut up. Not you, Alexa. No, Alexa, I'm gonna kill you. Not you, Alexa. You, Alexa, die. Live, Alexa. Now, we like to think that computers are neutral, but the fact is, AI is programmed by people, and people are biased. Bias is part of the human condition, like love or death, or having to whisper righty-tighty, lefty-loosey every time you open a jar. But that bias has real-world consequences. Take Google. You know, the place where you search your ex-boyfriend's name 6 times a day, even though you know you can do better because that idiot only owns one towel. In 2015, a black software developer named Jackie Alcine realized that when Google Photos used AI to categorize his pictures, they sorted images of him and his black friend into a folder titled Gorillas, which is insanely racist. In fact, it's so racist, I give it 6 months before that algorithm gets its own Fox News show. And Google's racist AI isn't just a one-time thing. In one experiment, it labeled a thermometer held by a white hand as an electronic device, and the same object held by a dark-skinned hand as a gun, which is unacceptable because in this country, the only people allowed to confuse random objects for guns are the police officers. But algorithms that label pictures are just the tip of an extremely racist iceberg. There's also an arbitrary face scanning algorithm that claims it can use AI to find out who is best for a job by scanning their face. There's an algorithm that claims to predict which criminals will reoffend that has been known to falsely flag black defendants as future criminals at almost twice the rate as white defendants. Now, there's a medical algorithm that favors white patients over sicker black ones, which is unforgivable in a system that already treats black people like an afterthought. Unfortunately, in America, getting appropriate health care is a lot like playing chess. When you're white, you always get to go first. That's why my strategy in either one is to just yell, "King me," and see if I get anything extra. But as bad as all those other examples are, perhaps the most alarming use of AI involves facial recognition technology. Recently, a Black computer scientist named Joy Blumwini found out that she couldn't get the robots she worked with to detect her face. She couldn't figure out why until Halloween when she wore a white mask. That's when the robots immediately recognized her as a person. Let me repeat that. A Black woman literally wasn't recognized as a human being unless she wore a white mask, a metaphor so on the nose it's basically a nostril. It's less a metaphor and more a solid ending for a Jordan Peele movie. And by the way, the only person who should have to wear a white mask to get attention is this guy. We get it, Phantom. Your love language is chandeliers and attempted murder. But Joy's isn't the worst facial recognition story, because if there's anything scarier than having algorithms ignore you, it's having them do exactly the opposite. Just last year, a man named Robert Williams was arrested for stealing 5 watches because facial recognition technology decided his ID matched a photo of the thief. There's just one teensy thing, though. It was not him in the photo. In fact, he had an alibi, and even the detectives admitted the picture wasn't him, but that didn't stop him from having to pay bond, find an attorney, and go to court. And the thing is, Mr. Williams isn't alone. According to a federal study on facial recognition, Asian and African American people were up to 100 times more likely to be misidentified than white people, which is insane. At this point, you can't even call it facial recognition anymore. It's just a ridiculously expensive machine that tells you if someone has a face. So the real question here is, what's causing these racist algorithms and how do we fix it? Well, let me say it again. Computers are programmed by people and people are biased. Not just white people, everyone. I know I am. For example, I think that any couple that rides a tandem bicycle is definitely plotting each other's murder. That's a bias I have and I'm not afraid to admit it. But in the case of AI, everyday biases have life-changing consequences. Basically, the bullshit we put into our computers is the bullshit that comes out. Like they used to say in church, garbage in, garbage out. Can the church say amen? Amen. Ha, you're a church. So that means we need diverse faces training the AI and diverse brains building it. And if women and people of color aren't included in the AI process, the technology will continue to exclude us, or even worse, target us. And we can't let that happen, because unless you're a ghost haunting an opera house, this should never have to be part of your work uniform. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick vowed to end tenure for public university professors who teach critical race theory in their classrooms. He tweeted, "We banned it in publicly funded K through 12, and we will ban it in publicly funded higher ed." That is just one of the most recent examples of white Americans' refusal to educate students about the advantages of being white in this country. Well, if they won't let schools teach that lesson, then I guess I'll have to teach it right here, right now, in a little segment called
The ABCs of White Privilege.
There's a lot to learn, so let's get started. A is for assimilation. Assimilation is when people of color have to adjust natural things about themselves to make white people comfortable. This includes code switching, straightening our hair, and saying the Beatles are good. I'm sorry, they stink and they're not cute. B is for Band-Aids being nude, and not just Band-Aids. Did you know that until recently, Black dancers couldn't find tights or ballet shoes that matched their skin tone? The only options available to them were nude, but whose nude is that? That's not what I look like naked. I look like this. See? C is for colonization. Europeans came to North America and stole this land from indigenous people, but we've been taught that Europeans were brave explorers when the only thing they actually discovered was syphilis.
Wow, that was great. I think the audience learned a lot.
D is for the doll test.
Oh, there's more.
There is more, Tarek. The doll test. In the 1940s, doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark conducted a test in which Black children were presented with dolls of different colors. Their studies showed that most children attributed positive characteristics to white dolls because of societal perceptions. Sad, right? But if you ask me, Barbie wishes she was as fly as Christy. E is for emotional tax. Now, they should call that shit physical tax because I have broken my back dragging white people into the light and I'm sick of it. It takes its toll emotionally. Oh, that's where it comes from. F is for being followed around stores. I'm looking at you, Walgreens. G is for gerrymandering, the act of manipulating congressional boundaries in favor of a specific political party, otherwise known as racist Tetris.
Oh, wow, you really did the whole alphabet.
H is for something we can't get. Good health care. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women just because they're black. And that's just pregnancies. You know they're up everything else. I is for implicit bias. Now, that's when we attribute stereotypes without our conscious knowledge. Here's an example. Crossing the street when you see a black guy, but not when you see a white guy, even though both men can and will kill you dead, and that's an implicit bias I have about men.
Hey, you know the show is only 22 minutes long, right?
J is for justice for all white people. The ACLU found that black people were 3.7 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than white people, even though their rate of marijuana usage was comparable. They say justice is for everyone, but it's really just for white people, like SPF 90.
We really gotta speed this up.
Okay, fine, buckle up. K is for Karen, duh. L is for laws, white people's FUBU, written for us, by us. M is for microaggressions. Examples include calling anything ghetto, asking us if we work here, or is that your real hair? The receipt said it's mine. Back off! N is for nanoaggressions, which are just itty-bitty microaggressions. O is for oppression, which is also the name of Mitch McConnell's cologne. Oppression for men, available at Walmart, next to the guns. P is for police brutality, which we all know disproportionately affects people of color. You know what else disproportionately affects people of color? Juveniles, back that ass up. It's like black people's Sweet Caroline.
No, we do not have time for this.
Fine! Q is for being qualified but underpaid and underemployed. R is for reparations. We've asked for them in every way possible, even Venmo. Run me my check! And my mule. We didn't forget about the mule. I'm gonna name mine Dante. S is for savior complex. When white allies feel like they are God's gift to black people, when we all know God's real gift to black people is rhythm.
No!
Okay, fine, no! T is for tokenism. That's the idea that you can only have one model minority in a group of white people. Now, this practice is used to pit minority groups against each other in an effort for them to excel in white spaces. This is not to be confused with Tolkienism, because there are no minorities in any Lord of the Rings movies at all.
Amber.
Fine. Okay, UVW, therefore upholding values of whiteness. The idea that white is always right is ingrained into the fabric of this country, when in reality, the only thing that is always right is the price and 90-degree angles. X is for xenophobia. Y is for why aren't we teaching this in schools? Why is this country so afraid to learn from its racist past and progress into a future where diversity, equity, and inclusion are the understood norm? And Z is for zebra. Yay, we made it! Yay! Now, see? That wasn't so bad, was it, Terry? Oh, well, I guess we don't know when Tarek will be back, but we do know
The ABCs of white privilege.
Tonight we're going to talk about prosecutors. You probably know them from shows like Law and Order, or The Good Wife, or Fancy Justice Lady who can really pull off a hat. Okay, I made up that last one. Or maybe I'm here from the future to tell you about your new favorite show starring Amber Ruffin in a hat. Prosecutors are so important, they even have their own signature sound. Oh, you know it. That's actually the noise prosecutors make when they orgasm. Scientific fact. But here's the thing. That is also one of the whitest sounds of all time, because it turns out that as of 2019, 95% of prosecutors were white. And man, 95% is so white, it's like, I'd like to speak to the manager white. 95% is front row seats at a Billy Joel concert white. America's prosecutors are so white, they think El DeBarge is a giant Mexican boat. And the racial disparity exists all over the country. But hey, why does it matter? Lots of things are super white and don't really hurt anyone, like living in Vermont or saying, I'll be there in a jiffy. How long is a jiffy, white people? I need a number. So let's talk about why the race of prosecutors matters in 3 parts. First, arrests, then charges, and finally, sentencing. We'll start with arrests. Now, I know what you're thinking. Aren't cops the ones in charge of arresting people? Well, sort of. See, there's no point in arresting someone if they're not going to be charged with a crime. And prosecutors have basically absolute power in deciding whether a person gets criminally charged. That's right. Prosecutors have the ability to ruin lives in a split second, like plane crashes or the Cool Ranch Doritos Locos Taco Supreme combo at Taco Bell. But I'm still eating that mug. And there are times when prosecutors choose not to press charges when they clearly should. For example, police wanted to arrest the 3 men who chased and murdered Ahmaud Arbery, but the local DA, Jackie Johnson, wouldn't allow it. Then the case was transferred to this prosecutor who said there were no grounds for arrest. Then they gave the case to a 3rd white prosecutor who still didn't arrest anybody. It wasn't until cell phone video of the murder was released that the state appointed this woman to the job, and she finally charged Ahmaud Arbery's killers. Basically, those white prosecutors treated actual murderers the same way you might treat a dog who pooped on your living room rug. Cover it up, pretend it never happened, and hope that someone eventually comes along and cleans it up for you. Since then, the 3 killers have been convicted by 2 separate juries, and as for whether the prosecutor's office was actually racist, it is worth noting that the first DA actually refused to prosecute the murderers because one of them had worked with her in the prosecutor's office. That's right, the man who was just convicted of a federal hate crime worked for decades in the office of the district attorney. So just like in Scream, the call was coming from inside the house. But arrests aren't the only place where race plays a role, because once you're in custody, prosecutors also get to decide what crimes you're going to be charged with, and that can be biased as well. A Harvard study found that DAs charged black suspects with crimes that carry worse penalties. They ask for higher bail for black defendants, they're less likely to offer black people plea bargains, and they ask judges to sentence black defendants to longer terms in prison. In every single possible way, black people face worse outcomes than white people, which is the opposite of what happens during a line dance. I love it. And even if somehow you are fairly arrested and charged, racism can also play a role in sentencing. Now, I know you think I'm going to give you a bunch of stats about how judges and juries give longer sentences to black people, and that's true, but it's not the most important thing because over 90% of felony convictions are actually the result of plea deals. And the terms of those deals are offered by, you guessed it, the prosecutors. Oh, good for them. They met someone. A recent New York City study showed that black defendants were more likely than whites to be offered plea deals that included jail or prison time. And it's not just true in New York. Take these 2 Ohio women who were convicted of embezzlement, Carla Hopkins and Debbie Bosworth. Now, first, yes, Debbie Bosworth sounds exactly like the name I would make up for that white lady, but it's also her actual name. Now, Carla stole $42,000, while Debbie, on the other hand, stole almost $250,000. And Carla was sentenced to 18 months in prison, while Debbie was given just 10 months. Just kidding, 6. Just kidding, 0. She was given 0 prison time. These are 2 women in the same county, in the same court system, who were sentenced within 1 year of one another. I wonder what could have made the difference. Basically, think of making a fair plea deal like singing along to a Jimmy Buffett song. Anyone can do it, but it's gonna go a whole lot better if you're white. It's not applicable to me in Margaritaville.
Yeah.
Is that Jimmy Buffett?
I don't know.
That's fair, you shouldn't. Now, I know I've spent all this time telling you about problems with white prosecutors, and to be fair, we don't know for sure that black prosecutors would fix the criminal justice system. We only know that in studies, black judges showed less of a bias against black defendants, that black cops are less likely to use force, and that juries with at least 1 black member are less likely to convict a black suspect. Does that mean that black prosecutors will do a better job dealing with racial disparities? How the hell would I know? Because here's the thing, there aren't enough of them to count. But we need to find out, because the next time I hear this, I only want to be thinking about one thing. Sweet, sweet lovemaking. Recently, Marvel Comics introduced a new character named Princess Matoka. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because Matoka is the birth name of an indigenous woman most of us know as Pocahontas. Now, I know what you're thinking. What a great opportunity to show a historic Native woman for the complicated, resourceful, brave person that she was. Well, instead, they did this. Wow, yeah, first, that's super racist. Second, it's very confusing to literally anyone who has seen a woman in her underwear. Now, in case you're wondering if this was drawn by a man, let me point out that there are 0 bra straps, and she's wearing gold pasties, and yeah, she's holding up a metal orb entirely with the strength of her breasts. Apparently, this comic is set in an alternate universe where Native women exist, but gravity does not. Now, if it's not clear to you why that character is upsetting people, let's take a minute and decolonize your understanding. Native women have been hypersexualized throughout American history, and the consequences have been devastating. According to the Department of Justice, Native American women are 2 to 3 times more likely than women of any other race to experience violence, stalking, or sexual assault. And that is terrifying. The only thing Native women should experience 3 times more than other races is compliments about their incredible community and nation-building skills. Dang. Good job. Good job. Now, instead of focusing on this offensive depiction of Matoka, let's learn about the reality. Now, many of you are probably familiar with her, mostly from Disney's Pocahontas, a movie about a Native woman who falls in love with an English guy named John Smith, saves his life, has a close personal friendship with a raccoon. Of course, almost none of that turns out to be true. I mean, I'm not ruling out the raccoon part. They're adorable, and they seem like great listeners. I don't know who her friends were. But in reality, Matoka was around 10 years old when she met John Smith, and he was almost 30. So instead of this, it would have looked a bit more like this. So, unlike the Disney movie, there was never any kind of romance between Matoka and John Smith because, and this is important, ew. Also, in every portrait of John Smith, he has this facial hair. And whether it's the 1600s or 2022, I think we all would have clocked that mustache as something you don't let around young children. So, Disney was wrong about the romance and the age, although that's definitely not Disney's biggest age-related lie. I'm just gonna say it. There's no way Chip is Mrs. Potts' son. Here is what she looks like when she turns back into a human. That lady is in her late 60s, easy. Now you're telling me she hasn't kid Chip's age? What kind of secrets are you hiding in that teapot, Mrs. Potts? Now, the movie also says that Matoka snuck food to John Smith and even risked her own life to stop her tribe from executing him, but it turns out those parts probably aren't true either. First of all, according to the indigenous site, Indian Country Today, when the colonists didn't grow enough food for themselves, John Smith actually stole food from the tribe by holding a gun to the heads of village leaders. So natives like Matoka likely gave John Smith food in the same way that a cashier gives all his money to a guy in a ski mask. And as for Matoka saving John Smith from execution, well, historians say that probably didn't happen either. In fact, many deny that he was going to be executed at all. That's right. Native historians have called out the lies, just like I'm going to call out anyone who thinks John Smith is hotter than Kokum. You are wrong, and I will fight you. You're wrong, and I'm going to fight you. John Smith looks like if Axe body spray was a person. He's the human embodiment of crushing a beer can on your forehead. He's the third to last guy on every season of The Bachelorette. And you know what else? John Smith's bangs are the McDonald's logo. There. That's right, I said it. So, why is it that many of us have learned this incorrect history? Well, because America likes stories about Native women that make it look like they welcome Western culture and live happily ever after. The actual story of Matoka is a devastating one. According to Native accounts, she was kidnapped, raped by colonists, and died before the age of 21. And no matter how many adorable raccoons you add, that story sucks. But it's the truth. So for just a second, let's bring back this picture. Now, the writer actually apologized for his depiction of Princess Matoka and vowed to change the name and the design after he was called out on Twitter by native comic lovers. But I don't want to focus on the writer of that comic. I do want to talk about why it matters. Because continuing to hypersexualize Indigenous women in fiction can lead us to ignore their abuse in real life. According to a 2016 report from the National Institute of Justice, more than 4 out of 5 Indigenous women reported they had been the victim of violence, and 96% of them described their attacker as non-Native American. Even worse, those attackers often can't be prosecuted. That's because a 1978 Supreme Court case called Oliphant versus Suquamish Indian tribe decided tribes have limited authority to prosecute non-tribal citizens. That leaves open a legal loophole where, in some cases, non-natives can enter a reservation, commit violence, and not be held responsible, which is insane. It's like if I went to Florida and kicked a bunch of people in the shins and then I got away with it because I don't live in Florida. That's not right. I should be held accountable or I'll just keep kicking. Poor Tarek. Now, here's the thing. We as artists and consumers have to be extra careful in how we treat Native people because our country has not been. The Amber Ruffin Show was filmed on the traditional land of the Lenape peoples, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. It is our duty. It's our duty to make sure Indigenous women are depicted with care and integrity, and more importantly, make sure they get a chance to depict themselves. That means supporting Native women in everything from writers' rooms to boardrooms. It means donating to the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. It means supporting positive Native representation by watching shows like Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls. And speaking of support, it also means making damn sure they get all the bra straps they need.